everyone, and welcome back to the Organizing to Victory podcast, where we're talking garage politics. On today's episode, we have Angie Gallo, former school board member of District 1 and soon to be Orange County School Board Chair. She's running against a Moms for Liberty candidate and is here to talk about the rollback on vaccine requirements and the potential harm that could be caused to our local students, and the voucher program, which is currently defunding in a fraudulent way, public school funding, and how together we need to stand up and fight for our schools. So please listen in and join us. Here's my conversation with Angie. Everyone, we have a very special guest here today to talk all things education. She is running for the chair of the Orange County School Board, and her name is Angie Gallo.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, Angie.
Well, it's afternoon, isn't it? Good afternoon.
They'll never know. So I'm so excited to chat with you because education's kind of a blind spot for me. I don't know a ton about I don't have any children yet. But, I think right now, every friend that I have who has kids are really, really scared. And I'd love, because you have such a background in education, I'd love to really get into the state of education today. But first, because this podcast was designed to inspire people to get more politically aware, I'd love to learn about your past, where you grew up and how you got politically involved.
Sure. So I grew up in Brevard County. So I grew up in Central Florida, born and raised in Florida native. And I came over to Orange County to go to UCF. So I'm a UCF alum.
Go Knights.
Go Knights. And so once I graduated, I stayed and got a job here. I was actually in electronics. Met my husband on a cruise. He lived in South Florida. So I moved on to South Florida for a bit. And then we both decided our jobs kind of brought us back to Central Florida. So we moved back to Central Florida, got married, and had children. And I always knew that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom if I was lucky enough to do so. Like, I wanted to be in that space where I could just be a mom and be around them and take care of them. And my husband traveled a lot, and I did too with my job. So we both couldn't travel. So I became a stay-at-home mom. And then, once they were school age, I got involved in schools. I got involved in their elementary school. I was in the PTA. I was on the SAC. And I did that through all levels, through their elementary, middle, and high school. And so I just got a lot involved in education around that time. And then probably what motivated me to get really politically active, although I was the president of my SGA in high school, was around 2007, 2008. I don't know if you remember. It was when the cliff started falling for education funding. We were kind of going through a recession. There wasn't a lot of money, and education was the first that was going to get hit. And that's what motivated me to get involved. I didn't want to see our public schools fail. I didn't want middle schools not to have athletics. So I was on the SAC at the time and on the PTA, and I started corresponding with my rep at the time about education, the need to support education. And it kind of all began there. I was at a legislative breakfast where a good friend of mine now was the legislative chair for Orange County PTA. And she was going over all the bills, all these things. And I remember looking at her, and she was so smart and so knowledgeable. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to get involved. Like, I want to understand what she's saying. I want to be able to help guide education policy. I want to make a difference. How can I make a difference? And so fast forward a few years, I was involved in the Orange County PTA. I was their rally and tally chair. Then I was their legislative chair. Then I was the first vice president. And then I got on the Florida PTA legislative committee, became their legislative chair. And so I did that for many years, and I spent months and months and months up in Tallahassee working on education policy. I helped to pass the recess bill. I worked on major Baker Act reform within our schools so that kids couldn't be removed without parental notification and without a lot of criteria happening first, right? Because we don't want, Baker Acts are very harmful for kids. Like, it creates so much trauma. So we really wanted those interventions in place versus just an SRO Baker acting our students. So I worked on that and worked on a lot of different policy. I actually worked on gun sense legislation because I was part of the Florida Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence after Pulse. And then Marjorie Stoneman Douglas happened. And I was up in Tallahassee. We actually did a vigil for the students when they came up, and we did a huge rally up in Tallahassee about gun violence. that thousands of people showed up to on the steps of Tallahassee. And that's kind of what propelled me into politics, right? I learned firsthand that small things can make big changes, and that your singular voice can make a difference. And your voice matched with others can make a huge difference. And I learned that I could, little old me could do some great things and make a difference in this world for our children.
I can just tell that you have a nerve that is just you have grit. Because I can only imagine, I'm seeing you on a bus with 40 kids all acting crazy, and you are just holding it down. And then to see you have to mobilize people up to Tallahassee and fight for rights, it's you can see where that seed was planted, and how it took someone who was able to balance the personalities of a busload of students to also be the one to go up to Tallahassee and fight for those same students.
Yeah.
And in today's, legislature and today's politics, it just feels more and more divisive. People are almost losing trust in our schools and losing trust in our teachers. I mean, what have you seen in terms of how we're treating our teachers and our leaders in the community that are, the foundation of our schools? What's shifted since you were the PTA mom?
So much has shifted. Several things, on the family front. I was a mom, and I used to tell my kids, and they will tell you, I better never get a call from a teacher or a principal that you've done something wrong, because the first thing I'm going to ask is, I have 2 girls. What did she do? And then when you get home, you're going to be in trouble. Because I believed in personal accountability, personal responsibility. If you did something, we're going to learn from it. We're going to grow from it, but there's going to be a consequence. And I think too often now, parents have kind of shifted to blaming the teacher versus looking at asking their child, what did you do? What happened? So I think that was kind of a shift. And when I was in Tallahassee, it wasn't so divisive. I walked into Republican offices. I walked into Democrat offices, and you could really get bipartisan support. I mean, the recess is a perfect example that had bipartisan support across both chambers. So it is different. I think where the transformation came in really was COVID.
Yeah.
I think initially when COVID happened and we shuttered our schools and everybody was learning from home and we had to go to a virtual model, at first parents were like, oh my gosh, teachers deserve the world. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't know how teachers do it. How do they teach my child? And they were so thankful to teachers. And that was so heartwarming to see, because I believe that the teachers are the backbone of education. I think without great teachers, we're not going to have a great economy or a place where education thrives or children truly learn. And then it shifted, I think, with the cultural wars. So once we started fighting over masking and going back to school, not going back to school, these cultural wars began over mask, and then it began over books. And then all of a sudden teachers are being called indoctrinators, and they're being called pedophiles, and they're starting to be called names. And then they just slowly started eroding the confidence or the trust in our teachers.
Yeah.
And most of it was totally unfounded. Because I would tell you, every teacher that I've talked to, if they're going to indoctrinate children, it's going to be that they can read by 3rd grade. It's going to be that they're going to be successful and they're going to learn and be knowledgeable and be good citizens and good human beings. If there's any indoctrination happening, that's what they would want for their students. Mm-hmm. So I just think it was their cultural wars and the fear. There was a lot of fear generated, and a lot of families got scared. And with the testing, the testing of our kids, I think that played a role. Parents don't want their kids tested all the time, right? Kids aren't happy when they're tested all the time. And so I just think there was just a snowball effect that has kind of led us to where we are today.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful that you have been so open-hearted and have still had faith, because I am scared that even if people agree with some of the culture wars or not, that because the public school sector has been, criminalized in a way, if you they're targeted in many ways, people are seeing charter schools or private schools as an alternative, and it sometimes can be a very expensive alternative. Have you ever considered like bringing your kids to private school, or did you always want to just go through the public school system?
My kids they graduated from East River High School. They spent their lives in a public school. There was a moment in middle school. My daughter won't be happy that I'm telling this story, but she got into a fight at school, and she was starting to hang around with some kids that concerned me. And when she got suspended for being in a fight, I was really upset. And I was out of town at the time because I was at a 5th grade overnight camping thing with my other daughter. Mm-hmm. They do it every year in 5th grade. And so I was there, and my husband had to go down and talk to the guidance counselor. And I did. I called around, and I considered pulling her from public school and putting her in a private school. And it was her guidance counselor actually that changed my mind. I had sat down with her guidance counselor, Mrs. Yeasted, and she was like, Angie, I got her. Like, don't pull her out. I'll take care of her. I promise. We'll get this turned around. I'll watch her. I'll take her under my wing. There's no need to move her. She was fabulous. She's still my friend to this day. And it was because of her, solely because of her, that I left her in middle school. And we still had our challenges in school. Knowing my daughter the way I know her now, she's brilliant, beautiful, actually works for a nonprofit up in Tallahassee. I would have had issues with her wherever I sent her. Like, private school wouldn't have been the be all end all, and she would never have gotten in trouble again. In fact, I think she probably would have gotten in more trouble because she would have been so mad about being there.
Yeah.
But Debbie did take her under her wing, and we got through middle school. We had some struggles in high school. And what I learned about my daughter is that she is extremely independent. And she just didn't like the regiment of school. Like, she did not like the school day where she had to be told where to be, what to do, when to do it, how to do it. Like, she wanted to have some decisions about her education. So her senior year, she dual enrolled and went to Valencia. Loved it. Really, I saw her just grow up so much and take off, and her grades improved. And she's doing fabulous now. But that was the only time. And I never even considered it for my second one. She loved her schools, loved her friends, had a great group of friends, and, still talks about our high school days to this day.
I mean, when you're as involved as you are as a parent, I mean, it becomes your second family.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
And it helps construct like the social fabric of who your children become as adults.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I'm not trying to say that private schools or whatever school that you choose is not going to do the same thing. It's just that I want to reinstill some trust in our public schools, mm-hmm. because it, like you had said in the past, public schools are open for anyone.
Yes.
And it helps everyone have a chance to have equal opportunity in
mm-hmm.
their education.
Yeah, because we serve all students, right? We can't turn students away. We serve the ones that have unique abilities. We serve the ones that have behavioral issues. We serve the gifted, and we serve the athlete, the musician, the drama student. We serve them all. And what I love about OCPS the most is the diversity, is the different cultures that we have within our school. I think that's so neat. And I think it's so neat for students to go to school and experience different cultures and what they look like. I think that it sets them up for the future, for their career, for their workforce. I think it also it makes them empathetic when they realize that not everybody has the same home life that they may have. Mm-hmm. And I think that's needed. I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely. And, I don't know a lot about the differences between charter schools, private schools, outside of the fact that if you have the resources, you have more options. I mean, maybe you can break it down for us to better understand the differences between those types of schools.
Sure. So I think we all know what a public school is. We serve everybody. You can go to your zone school. Now, even within public schools, there's so much choice because we have under-enrolled schools where you can choose to go. You no longer have to go to your home school. We have magnet schools that you can apply to. We have, schools that focus on STEM, schools that focus on sports, schools that focus on the theater, there's so many options. A charter school is a public school. It is a nonprofit public school. And I think that's where the confusion comes from. Some people is they think that charters are for profit. All charters are nonprofit. Now, the company that manages them may be for profit. And that's where the confusion lies. So you can have a nonprofit manager over which kind of manages your school, or it could be a for-profit manager over your schools. But for the most part, they are public schools. They are nonprofit. They have the same set of rules that public schools do, with a couple exceptions, like the building codes. Their building codes aren't as stringent as ours. They don't have to bus. They can pick and choose from around the county. They can send the students back to their home school, where we can't do that. They can require parental engagement, parental involvement, which we all know leads to the success of the student. So they're able to do some things that we don't have the flexibility to do as a public school, because we do have to serve all students. And then private schools are just that. They're private schools that you pay money to send your child there. And now you can get a taxpayer funded voucher to offset the money to go to that private school. The biggest growing sector amongst education right now really is the micro schools. They've grown and the co-ops, they've grown to like 3.1 million.
Are those Montessori schools?
No, Montessori school, you could have a Montessori charter school, a Montessori private school. You can even have the teachings of how their approach to teaching can be embedded in almost any school if someone chooses to do that.
It's a style of school. It's not necessarily a demographic, a specific categorization of a school.
No.
Financially.
Yeah, it's their approach to learning, how it's just a different approach. But the biggest increase we've seen, especially with those after COVID, is homeschool. So when I first got on the board, or even 3 years into the board, I think our homeschool numbers were sitting around 3,000.
Oh, wow.
No, 4 years later, they're at 9,000. And that's not including the parents that are in the PEP program, which is the personal education something, I don't know. But it's called the PEP program, and they go through Step Up for Students, which is our scholarship funding organization, and they get $8,000 to homeschool their kids. So we've seen a huge insurgence of those students. And the concerns that I have regarding those students is the accountability, because there's not a lot of accountability in homeschool. And I think there's a lot of great parents out there that homeschool very well. So I'm not trying to say nobody should ever homeschool, because there are instances where a child's needs are met best at home, and that's how they're going to learn the best for whatever reason. But there's some that think they're doing it well that may not be doing it well. And because there's no guardrails or there's no oversight within the PEP program, or even with those who aren't receiving dollars to homeschool their kids, that concerns me the most, because I worry about the students that aren't academically where they're going to be. I worry about what that means for our future workforce, for our talent pipeline. More importantly than even that are those kids being fed? Are they being taken care of? Are they being abused? Are they being trafficked? We no longer have eyes on them, so we don't know what's happening. And the school is an automatic reporter. So if you don't want your child to go to school because you don't want us to see the bruises or see the harm, then you can pull them out and get $8,000.
Yeah.
To do so, to keep them at home.
You were the first one that brought this to my attention when the voucher program was moving its way through the state legislature years ago. And it sent shockwaves through me spiritually, because I was one of those kids. My dad was extremely neglectful, extremely abusive. I wouldn't get a meal sometimes if I didn't get it from school. And, my teachers were my other parents. They were the other people that made sure that I didn't inflict self-harm or that I wasn't, out doing bad things, because we had very high student pregnancy rates. This was out in Deltona, where it's just a suburb. So there's not a lot of after-school opportunities or connectivity for students to do things. So I could have gotten into more trouble had I not. But I totally see my dad using that voucher program just to cash out.
Yeah.
And I had, at that time, actually, when I was in high school, I had a boyfriend who was a professional motocross player. And his dad homeschooled him, which didn't actually amount to actually homeschooling him. It was making him practice to win money through his motocross sports. He was like international professional player. And so the oversight I saw was just not there whatsoever. And I think that comes at a huge detriment to his ability to have access to education because his parents were using him like a cash cow.
Yeah. And that's some of the concerns I have. I really do think that the legislature needs to tighten up the laws surrounding homeschool for the ones that fall under our choice office. They have to be like someone has to sign off that they're making gains. It has to be a certified teacher. That there's several different ways that you could do it. They could come in and take the FAST test. I mean, there's several different things that's listed in statute that they could do. But a certified teacher can also sign off on it. But the certified teacher is looking at a portfolio of what that child did. That the parent created, right? So is there really oversight? And as long as that's signed off on, then they continue their homeschooling. And if they don't get it signed off, then they just drop out of the program and then they can come back a couple weeks later and then the year starts all over again. And then they don't have to present the portfolio or the signed document for another year later. And then with those that are receiving taxpayer funded vouchers, they are required to take a norm reference test. But my understanding of the law is it's more about they have to just turn it in by a certain date to remain on the taxpayer funded voucher system. It's not, it doesn't dictate that they have to do well on the test or they have to show gains. It's more of a reporting issue based on a date. So they have to turn it in by a certain date to stay current and remain in that PEP program. So what's the cost of a typical charter school and a typical private school? Well, charter schools are free because they get funded the same way that public schools get funded. They get the FTE, so they get funded per pupil. A private school, depending on where you go or what school you're going to be, it could be anywhere from $12,000 to $30,000 to $40,000.
So a charter school is free. Are kids at OCPS getting $8,000 voucher to go to an OCPS school?
Well, it's weighted. So every kid, if you were to look within the FEFP, which is the Florida Educational Finance Program, that's what we call the education budget, you'll see that there's weighted and unweighted FTEs. So a student is weighted based on their needs. Okay. So does every child generate $8,000 within Orange County Public Schools? No. Do some kids get more money than $8,000? Yes, because they have unique abilities. They have more needs. And so, of course, they generate more dollars as they should because we've got to provide resources for those students so that we can serve them well. So it's kind of like a weighted, not a weighted generalization. So you'd have to see where a child was within that weight to determine the amount of money that we get for FTE.
But it's not that the money goes cash in hand to a parent. It's that it goes to the schools.
Right.
But then for charter schools, it still goes cash in hand to the parent to choose to go to the charter, or it goes to the charter school directly?
It goes to the charter. It goes to the charter schools directly. It actually goes, I think that it flows through us and we give it to them.
Okay.
I'm not actually, I'd have to check on that. I thought that's what it does. And we do so we have to have oversight over charters, and we do help them with their students with unique abilities. We have to help them ensure that they have a guardian or SRO on their campus. And so we do get an administrative fee for that, which helps us fund our choice program, because they're the ones that are doing the site visits to the charter, ensuring that kids are learning, that the finances are in check and all those things.
But a private school, would they receive? So because I'm asking because I don't think private schools are $8,000. It's more than that, right?
Yeah. Most schools. Yeah. I mean, are there private schools that are popping up in a retail mall that may only be charging $8,000? Sure. There's even like virtual schools that you could utilize with the voucher dollars. So those voucher dollars, if you're using the taxpayer funded vouchers to go to a private school, then it goes to the parent and then the parent pays the private school.
But they're going to also add, because most private schools are more expensive, so they're going to add more of their own personal dollars. It's a subsidy to probably what are already typically wealthy families to go to a private school that they're just getting a discount from a public funding source. Yeah.
So when in Arizona, and I have to look back to see what our number was, but when Arizona was the first to roll out these taxpayer funded vouchers, and at the time, the following year after it was enacted, I want to say, if memory serves me, about 80 to 85% of all students taking advantage of the taxpayer funded vouchers had never once stepped foot in public schools. So I'd have to do some research to see I used to know what it was for
Florida.
Florida.
Got a free subsidy to go to the already existing.
We're subsidizing the rich. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the way I view it. I view that we're subsidizing the rich for them because they were never going to go to a public school.
While defunding our public schools where most families are really having a hard time to even get by, let alone be subsidized to bring their kids to private.
Yeah.
They sold this narrative that was very confusing to me of like, now this gives parents freedom of choice. But if you're already a struggling family, you don't really have a choice, even if you get the $8,000, because you have to come out of pocket to meet the rest for the private school. And you also don't get a choice if the dollars are being taken from your public school and now your school's at risk of potentially closing because now they've had such a decrease in enrollment. I mean, what has that experience been like?
It's been tough because what I believe is happening is that, to your point, that it's not enough to really cover the really good private schools. So that's why I think we're seeing such an insurgence in homeschooling, right? Because they're like, well, if I have 4 or 5 kids, I get $8,000 my child, I'm just going to homeschool them. And they have good intentions, right? They think that they can homeschool these kids. They think that they can educate them. But what's happening is that they're being pulled out of public schools. And I always say, there's room for everybody. If you want choice for your kid, I'm not going to tell you as a parent what you think is best for your kid. What I will say is I want to ensure that your child's learning. I want to ensure that your child's safe, and that they are having gains academically. But the issue is that the voucher has blown up to a $4 billion scholarship fund. And it is happening at the expense of public schools. You shouldn't be starving public schools because you created a program that has blown up so quickly, so fastly, that you can't keep up. I mean, this year, I don't want to get into the weeds because most people won't understand it, but we get paid, we get distributions of money throughout the year. And our fourth calc, which is one of the distributions of funds we get, we usually get in April. We never got it this year. And we never got it because the issue was about $4.1 million because we said we had 1,727 students that the state said, no, you don't. They're taking vouchers. And we were like, no, they're not. They're sitting in my classroom. And so we had to reconcile that. We did, I think, just like 3 weeks ago, get the $4.1 million. But now we're going straight into the fifth calc. We won't even get a fourth calc because the fourth calc is where it would show, kind of where those students were. And the system is broken. And the legislature has acknowledged that. Senator Gates is running a bill to try to fix some of the issues. It's only in the Senate. It just passed the whole House floor this last week. There's still not a companion bill in the House, but it does fix some of those accountability issues because at one point in time, they didn't know where 30,000 kids were. And there was $200 million that they didn't know what happened to.
So they could be double dipping is what you're saying. So
it's absolutely.
Parents are sending their kids to public school, but because there's no oversight, they applied for the voucher, got the money, and they're still sending their kids to the public school, which is more money that's covering their kid as well.
Yeah. So they started out in a private school and found that just wasn't a good fit for their child. Maybe they started as homeschooling and they realized I am not a teacher. This is not something I could do. So they send them back to public school because it's a public school, not understanding, no, the money followed you, you received the money. And so now you don't get to go back to the public school or you have to pay to go back to the public school. And it's not just happening with traditional public schools. There for a while, FLVS, which is Florida Virtual School, was almost like a collection agency because they would take a homeschool money and then go apply for classes at FLVS. And they'd be like, you're a voucher, like you're a step up for student, like you can't come here. And they'll be like, but you're a public school. Like they don't understand, because public schools have always been free.
You took the money that you were supposed to get through the public school system to make sure your child gets the education. You brought it somewhere else. You can't just bring your child back.
Right. But they don't understand that.
They probably thought like, oh, okay, this is just a good trial. It's not it was rolled out so quickly.
Yes.
And I don't think the education for the general population was there to be able to make such a huge shift. And it sounds like, frankly, there weren't a whole lot of teachers at the decision-making table up in Tallahassee to be able to inform some of the consequences that could come.
Yeah. And I will say that, so Texas rolled theirs out recently. And I believe that they did a better job because they capped it, like they capped it each year. So it didn't grow astronomically in 1 to 2 years, to $4 billion, where now they're already telling us it's going to be a tight year for education because they can't afford it. Well, why can't you afford it? You can't afford it because the vouchers has grown into a $4 billion industry.
Yeah.
What Texas did is they did a couple things. They rolled it out more slowly so that they control it so that didn't happen. They also, with homeschoolers, they only gave them $2,000. So they didn't give them the full amount. They only gave them $2,000 to homeschool, which I think then kept that in check. And the third thing that they did that I was most interested in when I heard was, and they don't have a CFO, but it's their equivalent to our chief financial officer. The chief financial officer is in charge of the funds. So while the DOE has regulatory authority or still has rulemaking authority and oversight over the scholarship funding organizations, the money piece goes under the CFO, which then provides more accountability. And I said, that's interesting. I'm wondering, because the DOE is not an accounting firm. Like the DOE, is not, and clearly there was a lot of errors that happened. There was a lot of money that was misspent or couldn't be found or was held in accounts for longer than it should be. Like there was a lot that happened that didn't provide oversight. So that's one of the things that I would, which is not in Gates's bill, but I would love to see the financial part of the scholarship funding organizations going under our CFO so that there's more regulation and more accountability for it.
Absolutely. And more of a process. It sounds like people were applying. Some people got double the amount without having double the amount of kids. So it just seems like the process could really have been streamlined more. But I also, my personal sentiments just learning through experts like you is that there could just be another fund outside of the public school fund to help create these voucher programs. If they really do want parental choice, why would it have to strictly be at the consequence of defunding our public schools?
And it shouldn't be. Like if you want to allocate $4 billion, that's fine, allocate it. But make sure that we're still receiving the funding that we need per pupil because it's expensive for us to educate students. And that's why we've been advocating in Orange County that we really want below the line, because right now all of the vouchers flow through Orange County Public Schools. It's basically, we're a placeholder. We never see the money. We never get the money. The money goes directly from the SFO to who was ever receiving it, but it inflates our budget to look like we have more money than we don't. And so there's no transparency because as public, you don't know how those dollars are being spent. So we've been advocating for accountability and transparency. Like if you're going to have these vouchers that the taxpayers are paying, okay, then let's put it below the line on the FEFP, like Florida Virtual School is, and let's make sure that it's done well. I mean, our own Auditor General said the same thing. Like it needs to be below the line. There needs to be more transparency and accountability for the taxpayer dollars that's being spent. Okay. And so I'm really hoping that the legislature follows, or the House really, because the Senate's already passed it. I'm really hoping that the House follows suit and falls in line, because I cannot believe that the conservative House wouldn't want transparency and accountability for taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, I have so many friends from all across the political spectrum. And I know many of my Republican friends are like, they're all about, you know, oversight and fiscal responsibility. Absolutely. And you would think it is a Republican controlled legislature. It's just that I really believe there is some opportunity to defund public schools because it has to provide fair and equal education across the entire learning spectrum. For some reason, there's almost a malicious intent. It sucks because our government is supposed to be the government that is looking out for even folks with disabilities and, you know, even gifted kids. But it seems like they're attacking dual enrollment. They're attacking the AP and IB programs. They're attacking, you know, teachers' ability to have, if they're LGBTQ, a picture of their partner on their desk. I mean, it just feels like every time I open my phone, I'm seeing another way that the state has been coming after our local public schools. And these things have real consequences, right? Like, aren't we closing several schools?
So we have 7 schools that we're consolidating. We had 2 in my district, Union Park Middle and Bonneville Elementary. And we had our community meetings last week, and it was heartbreaking. Like it was a very, very hard week because we're breaking up school families. Like these teachers, they're families. They're families with one another, and we're breaking them up. And we're breaking up the kids that have friendships, like good friends, may not be going with their best friend to school next year. Like, I mean, that's when you're in middle school, especially, that's big. Like
that's world ending for a kid that age.
Absolutely. Like that's heartbreaking. And when in the meeting, I told parents, I said, you can be mad at me. I get it. I'd be mad at me too. Like if my child was sitting on a couch crying because they didn't want to leave their school or they didn't want to leave their friends, I'd be really mad too. I'd be really mad. But we need to channel the anger where the anger needs to be channeled. And that's really at the people who are making the decisions that are outside of Orange County, because Orange County public schools aren't making these decisions. If we had a choice, we would not be consolidating those schools. We would keep those schools open. We're just financially at a point where we've got to have a certain amount of enrollment just to break even. And we're so far below that we no longer have the funding to keep the school open, because we've been adding funding. Like we've been adding to it because the FTE, the full-time equivalent for that student, just did not generate enough funds to pay the bills at that school, basically.
Do you think parents get it? Do you think that they're seeing that the state legislature is really the driver of some of these policy changes?
I think they're starting to. I think some do. I think this has been a wake-up call. So I think some are, getting it now. Mm-hmm. But they need to act. It's one thing to understand. It's another to really put emotion to action and really doing something so that your voice can be heard in Tallahassee and your legislator or Senate can hear from you and tell them what you believe should be happening.
Yeah, because I believe that the scope of what the school board is focused on is really just about like the quality of the education conversation based on the resources you have. Mm-hmm. And you're not in charge of figuring out what your budget allocations are. Mm-mm. Like that's the state legislature. And I don't even have kids. And I feel like I passed that one. But yes. I mean, and I really hope that they are flooding the calls up in Tallahassee, the inboxes and the phone waves are just going to be inundated and flooded with these calls from people that are showing up to your school board meetings because you can't be blamed.
Yeah, we're not, you hit it the nail on the head. We're not in charge of our funding. We've been lucky here in Orange County that we do have a half-penny sales tax that helps with construction and keeping and renovating our schools, which has been instrumental because we all know how hot it is here in Florida. Mm-hmm. And the chillers for our HVAC are very, very expensive. So without that half-penny sales tax, our buildings would look a lot different than they do right now. And we also have a 1 mil, which helps us support the arts, helps us support athletics, and does pay for some teachers. Because we found out a long time ago that we needed to kind of create our own funding mechanism to be able to ensure that our teachers, and they're still not getting paid enough, that our teachers get more money and that we really put our priorities in place, with the arts and with athletics so that every school you go to, no matter what school it is in Orange County, you're going to have arts, you're going to have athletics at middle school and at high school. Like we had to pass that referendum. That happened after 2007, 2008, when we thought we were going to have to cut athletics in all middle schools and all arts. And we went for the referendum because we realized we needed some control over what happens in Orange County because we know how important those things are to our community and to our students.
Yeah. So tell me about the charter schools, because I think they're trying to allow charter schools to move into Orange County public schools, but there's other costs that go into it outside of the individual students' costs. There's infrastructure, insurance. Are they sharing the financial weight of some of the infrastructure costs if they move into a public school? Like, how does that work?
No. So there was a bill that was passed in the very last days of the legislature last session, and it was part of the budget, and it's called the Schools of Hope. So if you're a Schools of Hope, and there's different ways you can be designated as a Schools of Hope. It has to be approved by our Board of Education, but you have to meet certain criteria to be a School of Hope operator. And if you are, then you can co-locate in a school that is underperforming. So any school that hasn't received a C or higher, I think, in the last 5 years, you can co-locate in those schools. Or if there's a school that's under-enrolled in an opportunity zone, you can, and that could be an A school. But if it's an opportunity zone, which is dictated by the federal government, you can co-locate in that school. And there's also a provision that if there's not a school that has space within the opportunity zone, there's like a 5-mile radius that you can utilize. So it like pinpoint something and then take 5 miles around that opportunity zone, you're going to capture a lot of schools within Orange County. And they're able to come in. They don't have to pay any of the costs. We have to pay for the SRO. We have to pay for all utilities, water. We have to maintain the building. If they want to be open at different times than we do, we have to accommodate them. We have to bus their students, feed their students.
What?
We have to provide the nurses for them. Now, we would get their allocation of their safe school allocation, and we would, if they decided to bus, get their transportation allocation. But right now, we spend $16 million more on school safety than what the state allows. So their portion of that safe school allocation, we're still spending above that. And so it would still cost us money. And transportation, we get 50 cents, I think, 50 to 60 cents on the dollar is what we receive to transport kids. So we would still be picking up 40 to 50 cents per dollar to transport their kids, even if we receive their allocation. And those are the only two things that we would be privy to financially. Everything else, we have to cover it. So when that bill got passed, we were having conversations. We know that the funding was happening. And so we were looking at schools that were under enrolled and what was our plan. I don't know that we would be consolidating them as quickly right now if it wasn't for the Schools of Hope. But with that breathing on our neck, and we know that we can't afford to keep that school open, like we are supplementing that school's finances because they don't generate enough money to keep the doors open. If we can't afford to have that school open on our own, we most definitely can't afford to keep that school open to bring in kids that we get $0 from, but we're left on the hook for all of the finances that are part of that. So then the charter school comes in for free, basically has to pay for nothing other than what little allocation they get that would come to us if they choose to bus or, at the safe school we would get because we have to have SROs and stuff. And I mean, it's just not fair. I mean, you think about the morale of teachers, because they're not paying for anything, they could have the ability to pay their teachers more. So think about if you're a teacher in this school, we're sharing classrooms. You may have had to move your classroom because the bill says we have to give them like it has to be like uniform. Like we can't like break them all apart. They have to have like a continuous space. So you may have to move your stuff because we've got to provide a continuous space. Lunches are going to be more crowded. Recess may be different. You're sharing your whole space. And what if there's a discipline issue? The way they handle it may be different than the way we handle it. Now you're going to have parents upset because they don't like the way the charter school handled a discipline case on a child that may have done harm to their child. And there's nothing we can say about it. Like there's nothing that we can do. Or teachers could be making $10,000 more than our teachers. And as a teacher, I'd be like, what the heck?
So are they certified in any special way? Like these teachers, is there any oversight or background checks or?
Yeah, there's background checks, I believe.
Are they as scrupulous as those of?
Well, Schools of Hopes get a lot of leeway. Like regular charter schools, because not every charter school is a school of hope. Regular charter schools, yes, they have to have certified teachers. They have to let parents know if someone's teaching out of their field of specialty, just like public schools do. But with Schools of Hope, no, they don't have to have certified teachers because they've demonstrated that they can educate students. Well, we've demonstrated in our A schools that we can educate students well with a high quality education, and we can't bring in non-certified teachers. Not that we would want to, and not that I would ever support that, because I believe you need certified teachers in your school that know how to teach kids and know how to manage a classroom. But with Schools of Hope, the rules are different.
So with the schools closing right now, is there any opportunity for Schools of Hope to come in and reopen those schools? I know you said it would come at a cost, but has that been entertained as one of the ideas, or is it just you financially cannot even try to collaborate in any way to keep those other schools open?
It's not financially feasible for us to keep those schools open. It's just not. I mean, if there was any other way, we would. Yeah. If there was any other way, we would. We do have plans for the schools, so the schools won't sit empty and get decrepit. Like we do have plans for the schools. We're trying to be really innovative in our approach. We're talking to the city and to the county to work with them to see if there's any like multi-use we can do with them. I know that we've been approached by someone to see if we could, and I don't know that this would be like, this has to go through our legal department, but could we turn it into affordable housing? You know, can we bring in junior achievement? You know, some of the things that we've never had the room really because we didn't have the space, we can really be more innovative with. So we're looking at bringing in micro schools, bringing in, doing co-ops, bringing in schools of schools. We're going to move some of our facilities from our older building. So instead of spending money to renovate those buildings that are falling apart, we'll move some of, like our facilities department, we might move them to where a school was. So we may see some movement. I mentioned earlier that we have 9,000 homeschools. So a lot of those homeschoolers do take advantage of Orange County virtual schools. And so the Orange County virtual schools will probably take up some space in one of those schools so that students have a place to go. to talk to people that are in Orange County virtual schools. So we're looking and really being thoughtful on what we can do with the space, keeping the community in mind. Because we want to be good partners. Like, Bonneville, especially, is right in the middle of a neighborhood. Mm-hmm. We want to be responsible. And Bonneville isn't just an elementary school. They do a lot to serve that community through food pantry. Their clothing room is bigger than this area, and it's filled with clothes and bikes and helmets and shoes and like everything that you need. And I asked the superintendent and she agreed. I'm like, we need to figure out a way to keep that open. We still need to service this community through this building. So we're trying to figure out what that looks like. So we have plans. We may not have plans for every school yet, but we're working on what that looks like. We have positive pathways, which is where our students get expelled, and we're having a lot of kids that are getting, they're vaping, they're doing things that, maybe we'll break them apart, or maybe we'll have more like positive pathways in different areas to serve different kids. So we're looking at anything and everything that makes sense, that can really add to the community and add to the student experience.
I can just see how it's devastating to a family, especially if it's intergenerational. Like if you went to a school and then your kids go to the school and then those kids still live close by and they want to bring their kids to that school and you really can't.
I hear that. There was a teacher at Union Park Middle that went to Union Park Middle.
Yeah.
And now we're consolidating. There was several teachers at Bonneville that their kids went to Bonneville. And we do like these walkthroughs when they graduate. So like if you're graduating from a high school, the seniors come back to their elementary school and kind of just do a walkthrough. It's kind of like a full circle moment, right? Like you started in kindergarten at this school and now you're graduating, and they come back and they do a walkthrough. And her senior will be able to do that, but her younger son won't be able to do that because the school won't be open as a school. So it's heartbreaking, and it has ripple effects. Bonneville has been open for decades. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Anna Escamani went to Bonneville. Mm-hmm. It's extremely sad. And so we're trying to figure out, I had a teacher ask if we could do something at the end of the year where we could invite anybody who wanted to come back into the school to take pictures, to walk through just like one final time. And I spoke to my deputy superintendent on that, and he thought that we can make that happen, and thought that was a really good idea that maybe we could implement in all 7 schools. Not that makes a big difference, but it's at least
you can say goodbye.
It's a little bit of closure for the families and for the community.
Yeah, it's definitely heartbreaking. And I hope that you get to retain at least the ownership of the properties in case there's changes in the future.
I believe we will. I haven't heard otherwise. I haven't heard that we won't retain ownership. I think one of the reasons we accelerated our timeline was to ensure that we did keep the facilities, because you don't know what the future holds. And it's not just the choice programs that are affecting declining enrollment. There's also a decline in population. Like people aren't having babies anymore, not at the rate they were. It used to be like 2.1 and now it's down to, I think, 1.6, 1.4. So the population is declining. Mm-hmm. And so until we can get people to have babies, I don't know how we're going to fix this problem. And I understand. So I often talk about how everything goes back to education, right? Like it's all intertwined, because people aren't having babies because they can't afford rent, they can't afford food, they can't afford daycare. All of those things lead to a decrease in population, or they know that kids are expensive and they can't afford it. And so they're not having them. Mm-hmm. And also people are establishing their careers, and they get to a certain age and they realize it's harder to have children at that age than it was when you were younger. And I think there's multiple factors that is the reason why we have a decrease in population. So there's several different factors that we're looking at that are the cause of declining enrollment.
Well, affordability has to be one of the leading drivers for sure. I'm seeing other teachers tell me that the cost of rent alone has gone up so astronomically that they have to move. They can't renew their leases. And that's one of the cascading reasons why they're not re-enrolling their kids. Homelessness levels have skyrocketed in Orange. I think we have 10,000 homeless students as of last year.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, last year. And by the way, that is a huge expense for us. I think it's like $33 million. Because if they're part of that, part of the homeless population, we have to bus them from wherever they are to their school of record so that they have stability. And that's really expensive for us to do. I have a 9-year-old student at Union Park Middle that's living in the woods. I've seen over on my side of town, because I do live over by UCF, the amount of homeless that I have seen, because they're kind of getting pushed out of downtown due to laws not created by the city of Orlando.
Yep.
So they've been pushed out into the woods out by me. And so I see them all the time. And it is heartbreaking. And I was so happy to hear that we're getting a shelter on the corner of Goldenrod and 50. That makes me happy. I would love to see if legally we could turn one of our schools or a portion of our schools into a shelter to help with the problem, because no child should have to live in the woods. How can you learn when your home is a tent in the woods?
I'm embarrassed for our country if in any way that's acceptable, even for one day. Like, that's a policy choice.
It's not.
And, you as a school board member and teachers, there's an extent in which you can help a student. But if we had the right policies in place, a teacher could be a conduit to getting that child off the streets.
Yeah.
If we funded it.
Yeah.
You get what you pay for.
Yeah. And in this particular case, we did reach out, because someone reached out to me and said, hey, Angie, can you help this kid? And so I went to our student services. They reached out and they had tried it's not that they didn't want to be in a shelter, just the shelters were full. The shelter, because to your point, it's exploded and the shelters were full. So that's one of the reasons why we're looking at affordable housing for our teachers. We're trying to we're doing some really exciting things. Like, we're trying to remove that barrier for our educational paraprofessionals and our teachers, because we know that they don't make a living wage in Orange County. They just don't. It's too expensive. Rent's too high. So we're trying to work with apartment complexes. We're working with one-stop housing. We're working with all different entities to provide affordable housing. Like, if we waive our impact fees, we're asking for them to set aside some for our teachers. We're looking at where we have land. Can we build affordable housing? Like, we wouldn't build it. We would partner with somebody. So we're looking at that so that we could provide more affordable housing for our teachers. And we're looking at daycare, like, what schools can we provide free daycare for our teacher and educational staff so that they can bring their kids to a safe environment where they know that they're going to be well taken care of, that they're going to be fed at little or no cost, to remove that barrier so that they can teach and continue to teach. So we're trying to do things because we recognize that teachers deserve more funding, but our funding comes from Tallahassee, and it's limited in the scope of what we can offer. And then healthcare. Don't even get me started about healthcare, because we could have a whole separate conversation on healthcare and the rise of healthcare within Orange County public schools. It's just, there's so much.
It's just that every single thing that you're talking about is such a nonpartisan issue, but when it makes its way through the state legislature, it seems to get the partisanship hands all over it and turns it into something that ultimately hurts people. And I hope that parents wake up and realize, like, regardless of political party, if they're not speaking to the policies that you're saying out loud, then they shouldn't be elected.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
In fact, I want you to run for governor. You would win.
I don't know. But I think, it's just not Florida. It's our federal government, because we do receive a lot of federal block grant funding from the federal government. Our Title I dollars help our most neediest kids. Our Title II dollars is what we use for professional development for our teachers. That's how they learn how to manage their classrooms. That's what we're using for the science of reading trainings. we're worried about the future of those. IDEA, the federal government promised us that they would fund that at 40%. They've never funded it over 15%. And now that's dwindling down. And so I feel like it's like this perfect storm. We're fighting everybody to get the money that we need to educate these kids. And yet without an educated populace, our economy falls apart. So why do we have to fight so hard to educate these kids? And we're accountable. We're held to very strict accountability measures to ensure that our kids are learning. And why aren't they concerned with the lack of accountability in some of the voucher recipients? Yeah. Because those will determine if we have a strong economy or not a strong economy. In 5 to 10 years, will we still have a talented pipeline? Will we still have an educated workforce that can meet the needs of our community? I'm hoping and praying that the answer is yes, but I'm very concerned that the answer is no. And that will be their legacy, because these are the education reforms that they created.
It also stunts us economically if our schools are suffering. You know, big businesses and industries would be more enticed to move into an area to create more jobs and other economic opportunities if the school systems were really good and the public transit. But because both of those things seem to be constantly chipped away at, then, you know, we're not attracting the types of industries to diversify our economy. We're really relying on a tourism economy that doesn't pay living wages. And, you know, we have to subsidize the ability for people to survive in so many different ways. And it's just not enough money to go around.
No, it's not. It's not enough money to go around. And I think that it's only going to get worse before it gets better. Like, it's got to fall apart. Like what we saw this past year with the taxpayer funded vouchers, it literally fell apart. They couldn't find money. They couldn't find students. And now, you know, I appreciate Senator Gates very much for filing the bill that he filed to help fix some of these issues. So, you know, I always say I'm not saying that if you're not doing well in homeschool that you have to come back to Orange County Public Schools if that doesn't meet your needs. What I'm saying is that there should be guardrails in place, that they have to at least try some type of brick and mortar or maybe virtual. They have to try something else, because at the end of the day, I think we all can agree. I think no matter what party affiliation, who you are, we can all agree at the end of the day, we want students to be prosperous, to be successful, to be good citizens, and to be able to contribute to the economy, not take away from the economy. And I'm concerned that the direction that we're heading, there's going to be more people pulling at our resources than we have generating those resources. And that scares me. That scares me for my children. That scares me for the town that I love so much that I live in, for the state of Florida that I grew up in. I'm a native Floridian. I love Florida. And so I am worried about that.
Well, we're also the top 3 states of human trafficking in the country. You would think the risk of not having enough oversight for even one child to maybe potentially be in harm's way for, you know, at-home abuse or potential trafficking would be enough to put additional guardrails. But the rollout of these policies were so quick that the risks are so much higher that if they just took 2 seconds to talk to an actual teacher and see that if a child is falling asleep in class and habitually like so hungry and their clothes are dirty and they're showing up with bruises, like, he calls into question the quality of life of that student. They're not going to have that kind of oversight because we don't put the guardrails in place.
Yeah, they don't. Yes, absolutely. And we actually have an advisory council on human trafficking at Orange County Public Schools. Jen Edwards, who does the Paving the Way Foundation, she's phenomenal. I heard her speak and I went up to her afterwards. I'm like, we've got to do this in Orange County. So I helped create that advisory council where we're actually going into, the Paving the Way is going into our schools, and the advisory council is really just about educating parents on what to look for, because I think a lot of people are misinformed about human trafficking or child trafficking in general. They think that they're getting swiped up put in a barrel, like shipped overseas. That's not even close.
Yeah.
I mean, kids are trafficked more online on gaming sites. And then they're convinced to do things that they shouldn't do. And then there's pictures, and then they threaten to show the pictures if they don't recruit. Like, it's so much more than what we even believe, and not having eyes on kids is so important. And at one time in Orange County, we had 24 trauma-informed schools when social emotional learning wasn't a bad word. And because of the cultural wars, like, so many programs that we had in place that really truly helped children, we've had to remove or redesign because they thought they were something that they weren't. When I was running for office and I would knock on a door, so it was social emotional learning at the time was a big issue back in 2022. And I'd knock on doors and they'd be like, "Are you for social emotional learning?" And I'm like, well, I'm for child resiliency. I'm for child accountability. I believe that every child can learn and that they need to show empathy for other people, and they need to have personal accountability. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, I agree with that. But I'm talking about social emotional learning."
And you're like, what do you think that it is?
And I'm like, that is social emotional learning. That's what it is. But there was this narrative that it was that we were asking all these bad things and that we are indoctrinating our kids. It was like so many, like, trauma-informed care, DEI, social emotional learning was hijacked, and the narrative of it changed, and people were convinced that it was something that it wasn't. And if you were to ask somebody, do you think that children with unique abilities deserves more? I would say 90% of them, if not higher, would say absolutely. Children with unique abilities need all the resources they can get. They deserve those resources. Well, what do you think that DEI includes? It includes children with unique abilities. They're a part of that. And so you're rallying against DEI. And I get, for some people, DEI means something different. But from an educational standpoint, where I am, diversity is a great thing. We have a lot of it in our schools. But when you look at equality, equity, and DEI, it's not about bringing students down. It's about making sure that we're lifting all students up, right? It's about making sure that everybody, and not everybody's in the same place or learns the same way. So some need a little bit more resources than the other because it's staggered. And all we're trying to do, we're not trying to do this, right? We're trying to do this. We're trying to bring them all, we're trying to bring the floor up to the ceiling. We're not trying to take the ceiling down.
Yeah. An even playing field so that, everybody has opportunity. I grew up, very, very, very poor, but I was able to get scholarships and to have opportunities because of my teachers and my public school system. But, you're running against a Moms for Liberty opponent, someone who has brought a lot of their own personal beliefs into the conversation and mobilized people who, are a little bit radicalized around some of the misinformation that they're learning on online or on TV. And I'm sure that in and of itself adds another layer of complication because you're trying to be, even though you're on the school board, you're still an active educator. You're educating the public, you're educating parents. And, I'm sure it's challenging to have misinformation spiraling or at least really strong biases enter the conversation because it just really detracts from what you're trying to do. And since 2020, that's been a common thread across every conversation. There's always now some counter that sometimes can be a misinformed trope. And when it comes to things like vaccines, for example, I think right now there's a lot of mistrust, just like we're losing trust in our teachers, we're losing trust in our doctors. And it's putting a lot of kids at risk, especially for things that we thought we already combated, like measles. How are you experiencing and handling some of those conversations?
Well, when we've seen measles outbreaks, right, across the country, at OCPS, we are still encouraging vaccines. We have to follow the law. So thankfully, the really good vaccines that prevent death are covered in statute. So it would require a legislative change for them to be removed and then be optional. But I have not talked to a medical doctor. I haven't read an article that the Pediatrics Association or Nursing Association or anybody that are really the experts in this field have said, yeah, we don't need those. Yeah. Not one. They're all saying no. These eradicated diseases, and they're safe. These are decades and decades old, and they're safe, and they've been researched. So why would we want to take that chance? Why would we want to take a chance to bring back a disease that we eradicated through a very safe vaccine? And more to the point, we do have students due to their immunities or due to disabilities that can't be immunized. They deserve to be in a safe environment too.
Right.
And if it's a parent's choice to immunize their child, then they're not just putting their child at risk, they're putting other children's lives at risk.
Yeah.
And while I believe that a parent gets to choose what is best for their child, it shouldn't come at the harm to another child. And they don't get to make a choice for another child. That's that parent's right to get to make that choice. And what I've heard just since the CDC has kind of realigned their vaccine schedules is that some have gone like into health clinics that wanted their children vaccinated, and now it's no longer offered free at the health clinic, and they don't have the funds to vaccinate their child.
Wow.
And so I have real concerns about what does that mean for our most marginalized and neediest students, right? Like if their parents want them to be vaccinated, but they can't afford it, and now you can't go somewhere and get it where they used to go. So I'm hoping those rumors aren't true, but I've heard from a couple different people that they've had trouble accessing vaccines, like the hepatitis B, the vaccines that the CDC kind of changed, and the ones that are under the authority of the Florida Health Department.
I mean, and our teachers are already so underpaid. Some of them are told that they have to like fundraise for supplies for their schools. I mean, there's such stress and strain being put on our teachers. Are we ready for an outbreak in a school right now in Orange County Public Schools with everything that's going on?
We would be ready. That's our job, right? And we have an emergency team, and we have plans in place to kind of handle every emergency. So we would be ready to do whatever we needed to do to ensure the safety of our teachers and staff in our community. But are the families ready? Are the hospitals ready? Is the medical staff ready? Because those will be the people that will be affected far more than a school will be affected. So I'm hoping that it doesn't come to that, because you're right, teachers aren't paid enough, and it's tough to be my youngest daughter teaches 5th grade math and science. So I hear from her frequently. So
here in Florida?
Yes, yeah, in Orange County.
What school?
Baldwin.
Oh, okay.
Baldwin Park,
Baldwin Park, yeah.
And so she is my harshest critic, which I love, because if we're not doing something right within Orange County Public Schools, I get a call.
Yeah.
And she'll be like, "Mom, like, what are you doing? That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard." So I have someone on that side of it to keep me in check, to make me aware if I'm creating a policy that's not a good policy. Mm-hmm. She lets me know. But yeah, there's a real concern around teachers' morale. The consolidation of these schools aren't helping. The rise in health insurance isn't helping. The fact that we can't pay them a living wage and pay them more money isn't helping. The fact that they're afraid of what books they can read in classroom or what books they have on their shelf. They're afraid, you mentioned it earlier that teachers were like parents to you.
Yeah.
Because they took care of you. They helped you. You trusted them because you were allowed to talk to them. Mm-hmm. And now teachers are afraid if a student comes to talk to them, especially if they're part of the LGBTQ community, because of some laws that were passed for parental notification. And I always believe that parents should be notified. Like we should always bring the parent in because it's the parent of the child. But when that parent's not safe, or when that parent isn't there for the child, mm-hmm. and the only way that we can talk to them is if there's a safety issue at home. So if the parent isn't on board or mm-hmm. isn't there for the student, who does that does the student, I guess, talk to their friends? And I'm not saying that a teacher should be telling a student what to do, right? That's not what I'm saying, because I believe in parental rights. What I'm saying is sometimes a child just needs a safe place to go for someone just to listen. You don't have to comment. Mm-hmm. You don't have to say anything. You could say, hey, maybe we need to reach out to the SAFE coordinator. Let's talk to a mental health counselor, and get a parental approval to do so. Absolutely. But I just think that teachers have always been a safe place for students. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's been eroded. And that makes me sad because there's a lot of kids out there that don't have a safe home environment mm-hmm. where they feel safe, that they can express their feelings or their thoughts. And I think that's why we're seeing one of the reasons. I could go into social media and many other reasons why we're having a lot of mental health issues with students, but there's no doubt that mental health is a huge part of our students' lives, and it's grown. People who are struggling with mental health has grown tremendously. Mm-hmm. We're seeing more suicides than we've ever saw. We can now no longer track because they won't let us use the CDC risk survey that they used to take. The state created their own risk behavior survey, but it doesn't give us the same information that the CDC did. And there was some information that did deal with LGBTQ youth where we could kind of pinpoint where there might be problems throughout Orange County, so that if we needed to provide extra resources, extra mental health counselors, maybe provide information on bullying, like get into the school and say, okay, we recognize we're seeing this and that trend in this school. How do we get in there to ensure that everybody feels safe learning? Because kids aren't going to learn if they don't feel safe, if they don't feel like they're in a safe environment. Mm-hmm. And I've talked to several students who identify as LGBTQ+ that will tell you they don't feel safe. Yeah. They don't feel safe. I think hate is having a moment. Mm-hmm. And it started with the adults, and kids absorb everything that the adults say, mm-hmm. and the kids are absorbing some of that, and harm is being done. And I think we have to get back to a place where we're teaching humanity and empathy and kindness and acceptance of people who don't look like us, think like us, believe like us, that has to be and should be okay, because that's what this country was founded on. And we have such a diverse population here in Orange County. We should be celebrating it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'm sure part of the decrease in enrollment is also the fact that people are self-deporting because, like you said, hate is having a moment and people are leaving. Yeah, 2,500
students. We lost 2,500 students that were immigrants, Venezuelan and others, because the temporary protective status was removed. And they were too scared to come to school because they were afraid ICE would come in and take them while their kid was at school.
And here this week, they're dispatching more ICE officers to come to Orange County, calling it Operation Tidal Wave. I believe that the schools will be targeted.
I pray that doesn't happen, because I believe in my heart of hearts that churches and schools should be off limit. There's got to be a safe place.
Yeah.
I was just at a press conference last week where there was pastors from across the county. It was at a Baptist church right off Corey Ford, where they were asking for moral clarity. They were asking for moral clarity for our leaders to understand that only 5% of those that have been deported were violent criminals. And the vast majority of them are Christians. They're Christians. And they're frightened and they're being torn away from their families and their kids are scared. I mean, these are humans that were created in the image of God. And they deserve respect and humanity, and they deserve to be treated with kindness. And most importantly, they deserve due process. You know, they deserve all those things. And so it's very concerning that for 2,500 of our students, I don't know where they're living. I don't know how they're learning. I don't know what they're eating. I don't know where they are.
I mean, imagine, so you got really politically active after several shootings. Shootings take, you know, a dozen or so students away from their friends, away from their loved ones, away from their schools in the drop of one day.
Yeah.
This just took 2,500 students like that in the course of 1 year.
Yeah.
The trauma that must have to, because if you don't know where those individual students are, I mean, their friends are probably worried about them and not hearing from them. If they had to self-deport to a place where they don't have access to internet or safety or only knows. I mean, that to me is causing lasting trauma to children right now.
And not just the children. When you think about our teachers and our guidance counselors and safe coordinators that had relationships with those students, it does for them as well. Yeah, it does for them as well, because they're, you know, they don't know, and principals as well. Like it's been heartbreaking.
It's so overnight too. That's the other part. And then there's no, like it's cascading. It's like, you know, mental health and defunding the schools, and COVID was such a huge setback for so many students' progress, and then social anxiety and social media. And it's like, and now I'm sure AI and, you know, now migrants that are self-deporting or getting deported in violent ways. All of these things are starting to really cause trauma that we don't know what the lasting impact of that will be on our economy, on our next generation of workforce, on our next generation's mental and emotional health in order to raise the following generation. We don't know.
No. And we won't know for a while, just like we won't know what the effects will be to our economy on all these students that are receiving the taxpayer-funded vouchers with no oversight or no accountability. We won't know for a while the harm that was caused. And I just pray, because I don't want any child to be harmed. And so I pray that I pray that our leaders are looking at these things and understanding that these are real issues. These aren't fake issues. I'm not over here making them up. We know that not every parent's a good parent. And we know some parents are good parents, but they can't afford to live. And $8,000 a student helps them put food on the table. They're not doing anything that's malicious, right? They're just doing the best they can to provide for their families. And they're going to do their best to educate their students. But you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so I worry about the academic of those students. I call it we need an education. I call it educational malpractice is what I call it. I also say, you know, we have a standard of care for healthcare. We need a standard of care for education. We need a standard that needs to be met no matter where you're going, whatever choice you're taking advantage of. There has to be a standard of education that has to be met. It has to be measured. Because as one of our governors once said, if you don't measure, you don't care. So does that mean we don't care about those students? Because right now we're not measuring. We're not measuring them.
That's what the Department of Education was at the federal level, setting those standards.
Well, they set the standards. So they set the standards for curriculum, right? Like they set the standards of what you must learn. So the Department of Education in Florida, and it's states kind of set, you know, because once they got rid of Common Core, There's no consistency anymore. So the state set the standards, and we have the new best standards, so there's standards for each grade level that the curriculum is based on, that is taught. So when I say like an educational standard of care, I mean, how are we caring for that student? How are we educationally caring for that student to make sure they are learning the standards that are in place, that there is accountability, they are making gains, they are learning, they are going to be prosperous, they are going to be in a skilled workforce, they're going to have enough knowledge to either go to college, go to the military, or get a credential, go to a career technical college so that they can get a skill that they need to live off of, so that they can make a living wage. You know, I read a study just recently that said that for the first time in ever that my children's generation will not be better off than we are. Every generation has done better. And for the first time, we're going to have a generation that will not be as wealthy or have as much generational wealth as their parents did.
Absolutely.
And you can tie all of that back to education in some way, right? Because if you're educated and you're able to make a living wage, then you are going to have some type of generational wealth. You're going to be able to live comfortably and have a family if you want to have a family, and make ends meet without struggling.
Well, I'm so grateful that you're running into the fire and running for school board chair instead of running away from all these extreme changes that have happened in such a short period of time. You're trying to climb up the ladder to take on more responsibility, to be more of a voice and be more visible on these issues, with the hope that the issues will be brought to light and that there'll be some policy changes. Yeah.
At the end of the day, I just want kids to be successful, and I want them to learn, and I want them to be healthy, both physically and mentally. I want them to be the best version of themselves that they can be.
Yeah.
And they can't do that alone. They can't. They need supports. It takes a village. It truly takes a village, and not just a village of education, but a health. You got healthcare and affordable housing. Like, there's just so much that goes into making sure that a child is healthy. And are we really doing the best we can as a state or as a nation to preserve and help our youngest residents?
Right. So I ask every guest this question as we're landing the plane on the podcast, but what is something you do? Because you seem to be the type that likes to take on a lot of responsibilities and go for your community. But what do you do to replenish yourself? Like, how do you refill your cup? Any hobbies or special things that you have to do, to routines to get yourself back in the energetic mood?
Sometimes it's tough. Like I was having a hard morning. I was having a really hard morning. And so sometimes I just allow that. Like I'm going to allow, I had a hard conversation last night with someone that I love. And, I had a little pity party this morning. And so I just allowed myself to have a pity party and knowing that, okay, I'm going to handle this with grace and I'm going to handle this with love. I do Pilates. That centers me. I try to focus on the gratitude and the blessings that God has given me, because I have so many people in my life and so many people that I'm thankful that were brought into my life through education, through politics. You're one of them. I would never have met you had we not intersected in that way. And I'm thankful for the people that God put in my life that's working just as hard as I am and believes in things can be better and should be better and are fighting to make them better. So I think between the gratitude, the Pilates, and then sometimes just having a good old pity party for an hour or two, or maybe even a day. Yeah. I think that's how you stay grounded, and then you pull up your bootstraps, because if not me, then who? Absolutely. If not me, then who? If not us, then who?
I think that all the time. I mean, I turned 35 and I cry all the time. I'm like, and I just let it come out. Like either at a sad song or even at a movie that made me laugh to the point of crying. Like I just let it come out, and then I feel cleansed inside. But I think, you have to see, you kind of have to be somebody's therapist while you're a school board member, because there's a lot of stories. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of people that have nowhere else to go because maybe they can't go up to Tallahassee to air out their grievances. And because you're the face of the school board, they're going to come to you.
Yes. And this is your child. This is their most precious thing that they've ever had in their life, right? Yeah. And I think focusing on the good too, because I will say we're doing a lot of great things in Orange County Public Schools. And I see teachers stepping up every day. I see students stepping up every day. And that brings me hope for the future. Going to that press conference where I heard all these pastors pray and ask for moral clarity it renewed my faith. Like it's recognizing when you see good people and good people doing good things, and you're just thankful for that. You're thankful because there is so much goodness and kindness. Sometimes we get caught up, I know I do, in all the negative things, and I get angry and I just want to rally at the world. And you kind of have to sit back and go, but what about all the good things?
Yeah.
What about all the good things?
I'm grateful that you do that, because I want to stress to the viewers here that a Moms for Liberty, even just one member of the school board, can cause a lot of chaos that detracts from the progress. If you're wanting to talk about things like, funding for schools and, how to improve the education, and they're trying to challenge books and make culture wars more extreme and more in the forefront and inviting people to be disruptive, like that takes away from the quality of education, and it changes the dialogue. I really want to stress that the risk of having a school board chair be Moms for Liberty in Orange County could send a huge wave across the state that could cause other school boards to be at risk. And so I just want to thank you for towing the line against that fight.
Thank you.
And I really want you to plug how people can get involved to help you, because you're going to need help.
I'm going to need lots of help because it is a countywide race. I've never been in a countywide race before. So my website is voteangiegallo.com. There's a bunch of information on ways to get involved, ways to donate, to get a yard sign. If you want to come canvass with us, I would encourage you to do so. More importantly, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. If you support me, let everybody know, because word of mouth is one of the most powerful things that we can use as candidates to get elected, because people trust their friends. And so, talk about the school board races. Sometimes we get often overlooked. We're one of the most undercounted on the ballot. So please pay attention, vote in August, because that's when the school board races happen. So make sure you're not missing that August primary. It's very important for you to vote.
August 18th.
Yes.
And even though, I'm excited about you running for school board, I hope that's not your last stop. I hope you do eventually run at the state level and maybe even statewide. But
you're so
you got to start somewhere.
Well, I'm just, my passion has always been for kids. So it would be really hard for me to move
up. Yeah.
Move up, just because if there was something really happening and I thought, okay, I need to do this because this will be impactful for students, then maybe I would consider it. But I always have a range of I don't, because I don't care about trash cans. I care about them. I care about potholes. I don't want my car to run over one.
But my passion
is about students and ensuring that they're safe and they're loved, and they're in safe places.
Well, I can't wait to have you on a little closer again to the primary. And next time I'll bring an apple for you. I didn't do my homework and I didn't bring an apple for the teacher. But thank you so much, Angie, for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you for watching.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you heard today, please comment, subscribe, and share. And visit organizingtovictory.com so that you can learn more about all the ways that we're going to be organizing this year. It is the most important election year of our lives. I know you hear that all the time, but we here at Organizing to Victory hope to not just talk about the issues, but to organize around the issues. So please share, subscribe, and follow us. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.